I think it would be great to talk a little bit about how we can make our lessons more dynamic. So I want to share some ideas and activities that you can incorporate into your classes that will make them more dynamic, more enjoyable for your students, and hopefully as a result for you as well. So let's go. The first thing I want to talk about is teaching vocabulary. So one way we can make teaching vocabulary a little bit more interesting and engaging is by doing an activity like Pictionary. So let's take a vocabulary topic such as food. Instead of getting the students just to do a matching exercise, or even after you've done the matching exercise, you could set up some teams and have a game of Pictionary. So a member of one team comes to the board, you show them a word with the name of food written on it, and they must then draw an image of that food, and their team must guess what it is. And of course, the competitive aspect here, where you've got two teams competing against each other, can be really enjoyable and can really get the students engaged. Similarly, charades can be really effective too. So something I've tried before with an upper intermediate class is when teaching idioms, expressions like to give someone a hand, to be over the moon, a piece of cake, these kinds of expressions. I would have a member from each team come up, I would show them the idiom, and then they must communicate to the rest of their team what the idiom is. But of course they cannot communicate verbally, so they've got to use gestures, they've got to use their actions to try to communicate this idiom to their team, and whichever team guesses the idiom first are the winners. So that can be a lot of fun. It can get pretty crazy. Another option for vocabulary could be last man standing. So maybe you are reviewing some verbs or some irregular verbs. So you could take your class, get everybody to stand up in a circle. You can have an object like a ball, and the students throw the ball to different people in the circle, and each time the ball lands, each time somebody catches the ball, they must say an irregular verb. If they're correct, they keep standing and they pass the ball on to another student. If they're incorrect, they must sit down, and the student who is still standing at the end of the activity is the winner. And of course, you don't just have to do this with verbs. You could do it with any vocabulary topic. To go back to the earlier example of food, or it could be sports, or whatever the topic is that you're teaching. Stop the bus. Now this is a fantastic way, in my opinion, to review vocabulary. So maybe at the end of a lesson or the end of the week, you could use this activity. So for those of you who haven't heard of it before, what stop the bus is, it involves, first of all, you need pairs or teams. Each pair or team has a piece of paper and a pen. Now you will then say a category. So the category could be food, it could be objects, it could be whatever. I guess the more specific the better. So let's say you've been teaching food. This week is the vocabulary topic. So in this activity, in Stop the Bus, you could say, okay, everybody write down 3 examples of food that you can eat for breakfast. And each team needs to write down 3 examples. Once they're finished, they put the pen down and they shout, stop the bus. So whoever says stop the bus first, then everybody must immediately finish writing. So you ask this team or this pair, okay, so what are your 3 items? So they say, okay, you can have cereal for breakfast. Cereal, yeah, that's correct, very good, 1 point. You can also have toast for breakfast, okay, 2 points. And here in Ireland we have the Irish breakfast, So they might say you can have sausages for breakfast. Okay, sausages. But this team over here has also written the word sausages, so no point. So the objective here is to try to think and write down words that the other teams won't think of. So you need to be a little bit creative here. You can't always go for the easiest options. So again, the competitive aspect here can make it very enjoyable and a lot of fun. And you can use this to review, a variety of different vocabulary topics. Another great way to teach vocabulary can be bingo. So, you could do bingo with synonyms, words that have a similar meaning, antonyms, words with an opposite meaning, or even better, you could use pictures. So you as the teacher, you say the word, and when the students see an image of the object on their card, they can cross it off. Of course, once they complete a line, they shout bingo. Taboo. Taboo is another really, really enjoyable way you can teach vocabulary in the classroom. So what taboo involves is a student must describe a particular word, a particular vocabulary item to the class or to their team, but they must do it without using certain words. So say for example, maybe the word is water. So the student must describe water to their team so they can guess what the word is. But when they're describing water, obviously they can't say the word water, but maybe they also can't use the words wet or drink or ocean. So they've got to describe this word using words that they know, but without using these obvious words that are usually used to describe it. So it can be a really good way of challenging your students and reviewing vocabulary at the same time. Treasure hunts. So this can be another really fun way to review some vocabulary. So maybe the topic is prepositions of location. In, on, under, opposite, between, beside, near. So these words here. What you could do after you've taught the vocabulary, after the students have done a bit of practice using them, you could give them an object that belongs to you, any object, and you could say, okay guys, I'm gonna leave the classroom now. You've got 1 minute and you can hide this object anywhere in the classroom. So you come back in and you then need to find your object. So you can do this by asking the class, okay, let's say you use a phone as an example. Is my phone opposite the whiteboard? And they might say no. And then you can say, okay, is my phone under the table? And they might say no. And then you can say, is my phone in a bag? And they say yes. So what they're doing here is they're listening and understanding the prepositions and using them to help locate the object. So once you've demonstrated this as the teacher, you can get the students to do it. So then the students must come in and ask the questions using the prepositions to try to locate an object. Okay, cool. So there are just some ways we can make teaching vocabulary a little bit more dynamic. But what about teaching grammar? So unfortunately, grammar has a reputation amongst many students as being the boring part of the lesson. So how can we make this more enjoyable and engaging for our students? Well, the first thing we can do is, with our grammar presentations, it's usually better to keep them short and to the point, because let's be honest, young people especially, their attention spans, they aren't always the best. There's only so long you can keep their attention, especially during a grammar presentation. So try not to make them too long. Focus them on the particular language you want to teach, and keep them short. Also, don't just rely on your textbook to teach grammar. It can be really advantageous to use some authentic materials or real life examples to elicit the target language. So let's say let's say you're teaching the second conditional, for example. You could lead into the language by telling the class, oh, I was reading an article about Bill Gates yesterday, and it said he's one of the world's richest men. He's a billionaire, and it made me think, what would I do if I had €1 billion? And what would I do if I was a billionaire? And there's your language. There's your second conditional. So you're using this real life example, or just a story you've made up to get their attention, and you're putting the language on the board. So you're giving them some kind of context to associate with the language, and from there, you could quickly elicit your use. Is this a real situation? Am I really a billionaire, or am I imagining? Is it a imaginary or hypothetical situation? The class will tell you, oh, it's not real. You're not a billionaire, unfortunately. And then you can say, okay, but when I'm imagining here, or this hypothetical situation, is it in the past? Or could it be now in the present or the future? And you'll elicit from the class that it could be in the present, but also in the future. And you say, okay, so this is the second conditional. This is what we use it for. Now, how do we use it? Then you've got your forms, if plus past, simple, etc. So one way, you can quickly present some grammar, but you can do it in such a way that it's not just relying on the textbook. It's a good way to get the learner's attention, and also they'll associate the language in a context then. Also, really important, don't forget to elicit examples from your students. So of course, the teacher needs to speak during the grammar presentation, but you can involve your students in it. You could get them to give you some examples. So to go back to the second conditional, okay, what would I do if I had $1 billion? Okay, well, I would buy whatever. And then you could say, okay, well, Mariana, what would you do if you had a billion dollars? And you could elicit the sentence using the language from the student. Write it on the board. Okay, if Mariana had $1 billion, she would buy whatever. So you're involving the students in the presentation, in the teaching of the language. Okay, so you've presented your grammar. You've had a short, focused presentation. You've involved the students in the presentation. So usually, what we do next is some controlled practice. Maybe a gap fill exercise from the textbook. Now, when we're correcting, I think it's really important to add some variety to the way we correct. So instead of just going around the room in sequence, okay, question 1, all right, very good. Question 2, question 3. Instead of doing this, what we could do is we could, once a student has answered a question, they can then choose any student in the class to answer the next question. You could use a prop, like this little guy here. This is his name is Ronaldo, and he's become quite popular with my students. So once a student answers the question, they throw Ronaldo to whoever they want to answer the next question. What this does, it kind of ensures that your students need to be paying attention, because they don't know, oh, I could be asked next, so I need to follow what's happening here. They don't want to be caught out. Something else you could do, you could place a marker down on the table. Say, okay, guys, if you think you know the answer, please come to the board and write it down. Once a student has written the answer, they'll pass the marker on to someone else, and this way, as a teacher, you're putting all the emphasis back on the students. You're really involving them in the process, and you're reducing your teacher talking time as well, which is a really good thing to do. And then once we've done our controlled practice, we usually move on to our freer practice. So something I've had a lot of success with in the past is using role plays. So an example of this, let's say our language has been question forms. So we're teaching our question forms, our inversion, our auxiliary verb plus plus subject, and we want to review this. So what kind of role play could we use to review question forms? Well, we could do, we could do a speed dating role play. So you could say, okay, you guys, you're going to go on a date. You're going to meet someone for the first time. You can ask them 5 questions. What 5 questions would you ask? So the students prepare their questions, and then they role play the date with their classmates, where they ask and answer these questions. And as the teacher, you're monitoring. You're probably monitoring from a distance, but you can be taking note of some errors, which then brings us on to the final point here, which is try to conclude the class with some error correction. So what I usually do for error correction at the end of a grammar lesson is I would write some examples of incorrect language on the whiteboard, usually examples that I've taken from the class, from the students. I put them on the board, and I put a marker down on the table, and I say, okay guys, I think you did a really, really good job with the exercise. I heard a lot of really good examples of using the language correctly, but just have a look at the board. Do you see anything wrong with any of these sentences? If you think you see a mistake, take the marker, come to the board, and see if you can correct it. And again, you're encouraging the class to work together to correct the errors. And also as a teacher, you're of course you're still observing everything, you're still in control, but you're putting a lot of the emphasis on the class, and you're reducing your teacher talking time. And then finally at the end, you could clear up any doubts or misunderstandings or questions the students might have. All right, brilliant. I just want to conclude with some other ideas we can use to make our lessons more dynamic. So one thing is a prop. So a few minutes ago I mentioned this guy here, Ronaldo. A really good prop to add to the classroom, add some variety to the way you correct. But other examples of props could be images. For example, images are a great way to get our learners attention, or take the attention away from the book, show them a picture, put the pictures around the room. Board races. I'm a huge fan of board races. So the way a board race works is usually we'd have 2 teams. One member of each team has a marker, and they must run to the board to complete a task. And they're competing against each other to see who can complete it fastest. So an example would be, maybe you're teaching some phonemes, some sounds. So you've got the E sound maybe and the shorter I sound. So you as the teacher, you can say a word. Okay. Last week the weather was very nice, so I went to the beach. Now the students, they must listen to the word and immediately run to the board and write the word they heard with the correct phoneme. So beach, is that the E sound over here, or is it the I sound over here? And whoever can write the word first in the correct position receives a point for their team. So board races can get quite crazy. The students can get very competitive, but it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun too. Time challenges. I mean, this can work with all age groups and all levels. Let's say you're doing a brainstorm at the beginning of class. Okay, I want you to think of as many different examples of food as you can. Work together. Go. All right. The students, maybe they won't be so motivated. You haven't given a time limit. So what you could do is, all right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I want to see how many different examples of food you can think of in 2 minutes. All right. The word must, of course, be English, and your spelling must be correct. Pens down. 3, 2, 1, go. And what you do, you kind of build some anticipation, and especially when you say pens down, sometimes the students, they'll be shaking, they want to start writing so much. And again, there's a competitive aspect here. The students, they want to see how many different words they can get. Can they get the most in the class? And then when you're getting your feedback, okay, was anyone able to write more than 10, more than 15, more than 20? You can get the examples up on the board after that. But setting a time limit, of course, it's important for all aspects of the lesson. When we're setting a time limit, it's important we give the students enough time, but not too much time, so they feel suitably challenged and as a result motivated. Okay, another thing you could experiment with is allow the students to become the teachers. This is something I've done quite often in higher level classes. If the students have completed an exercise, I've had a look, and I've one particularly strong student, and I see they've got all the right answers. I'll ask that student to come up to the board and correct it from the class. And again, as a teacher, you're always in control here, but you're just putting the focus on the student. So the students have a lot of fun then pretending to be the teacher. But if of course, if there are any errors or mistakes, you're still available to explain. Always change the seating arrangement. So I do this 2, 3, 4 times in a lesson. My classes, they're usually about 3 hours long. The 3 hours is a long time to be sitting in the same place, working with the same person. So in between some activities, I change the seating arrangement. You can do this in different ways too. So let's say you've got a class of 12 students. Okay, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, number 1s, hands up. Number 2s, number 3s, 4, 5, 6. Okay, find your new partner. There are lots of ways you can do this. You could say, okay, guys, 2 minutes. I want you to sit in order of your date of birth. So you could have, the students born near the beginning of the year here, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and they've got to run around and speak to each other to find out when they were born. And again, the time limit here can really add to the task. So, you can, even with these seemingly really basic parts of the lesson, like changing the seating arrangement, you can have a little bit of fun with it. You can introduce some challenge and some excitement to it. Pronunciation. So obviously drilling pronunciation, it's a really, really important part of a lesson, but sometimes as teachers we're almost reluctant to do it because it just feels so monotonous, so repetitive. So we go back to the word beach. Okay, beach, 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 and the students can be reluctant to do it, and it's not so fun, So even with something as routine as this, we can make it a bit more dynamic. We could say, okay, just the guys in the class, beach. All right, just the ladies, beach. Just the people who have gone to a beach last week, beach. Okay, only the people from Brazil, beach. Okay, the people from Europe, beach. Oh, I think the Europeans were better that time. And again, you can really have some fun with it. And again, that competitive aspect, and ask the students how they think each other did. Oh, how do you think the Brazilians sounded there? Or guys, do you think the girls did a good job? The students they're having a bit of fun. They're giving each other feedback. All right, so that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you found it useful. I hope these are some ideas you can implement in your lesson. I'm sure some of them you already do. Hopefully some of them were new. Also, I'd be really curious to know what you think. So, if you found the video helpful, please let me know. But also, if there are any ideas or activities you use that you feel make your lesson more dynamic, please share it. Leave a comment. I'd love to see what you think. I'd love to see some of your ideas. And also, of course, I work at Erin School of English here in Dublin. So if you guys have any questions about the school, or you're interested in sending a group over here, again, please leave a comment, ask the question, and my colleague Larissa will be really happy to get back to you and answer any of your questions you have. So thank you so much. This time next week we'll do another webinar. So again, it'll be 5 p.m. Irish time next next Wednesday. I really look forward to seeing you then. I look forward to seeing your comments. If you've got any friends or colleagues who you think would also enjoy these videos or benefit from them, or have some ideas they want to share, please invite them to watch and to participate. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you guys very soon. Cheers.